as a reminder, we're reading this book. Go away. But yesterday, as we talked, oh my gosh, she referenced this book, so I thought it'd be cool to talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, here are 2 books for the day. Okay, I'm genuinely not sure how long I'm going to survive in this heat. It is not even 9 a.m., I think, but we're in Georgia and it's hot, so I'm probably going to sweat. It is what it is. I probably should have brought a rag out here. But I thought it'd be cool, given the topic that we're exploring around Black land reclamation, that I'd actually do at least one video outside on our property. We own 9 acres. There's this beautiful water here. I think you can see some of that. We have a few pastures. We also foster horses. We have goats, and we have the dogs, which will probably come in the video at some point. They are Velcro dogs. Love them, but they are Velcro dogs. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about not only Root It, because we're still exploring Brea Baker's work, and that's going to be kind of our cornerstone, our main book, but that we would talk a little bit about Imani Perry's book, Imani Perry's Black and Blues, How a Color Tells the Story of My People. I have not finished this book yet, but it's really good, and so I'm working through it. But when I saw that, when we were reading yesterday, I was reminded that Brea Baker actually references Imani Perry's book in chapter 1 of her book that we were exploring. And one thing that really helps reading comprehension is to read across sources or across books. So when you see that one author is referencing another, it's worth it to explore why they reference them and to go to that original text, because obviously we're reading Brea Baker's interpretation of Imani's work, but it's really great to have your own interpretation that builds the critical thinking skills, the analytical skills, the comprehension skills, which is really, really important. And so it's important not to just understand the words on the page that Brea Baker is sharing, but the words across multiple pages and on multiple sources. And that's how you know it's good. If we're talking nonfiction, a book is good when they not only reference other things, but they cite their sources. You know what I mean? Like, that is good quality research. It shows the depth of her work once again. And I just really respect and appreciate that. Oh, the wind. Okay, that's helpful. I really appreciate that. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of read an excerpt from Imani Perry, because they're in conversation together. And that's something that has stuck with me throughout my PhD and after my PhD. One of my advisors said, scholars are always in conversation with. And when you write your book or when you do your research, you have to ask yourself, who do you want to be in conversation with? So it's cool to read both authors because they're in conversation with each other. And if we want to join the conversation, we got to have the full context as best as we can. So for me, it's a fun way to read. For you, it might be like, that's a lot of extra work. And is. But I'm here for the work. That's kind of the whole point of my page. I want to improve our comprehension, and this is one way that we can do it. I know some people are against writing in books, but I like to really engage with the text, so I'd be highlighting and everything. And I think that's the researcher in me. And what I love about this book is it's all about the color blue and how it shows up in different ways in Black traditions, really around and throughout the diaspora. And they have these stunning images. And as a photographer or ex-photographer, that just really sticks with me. Okay. Anyways, I highly recommend checking out the book. But let's get back to Root It. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, so this is chapter 3. It's called So Much for 40 Acres and a Mule, 1862 to 1876. This is such an important time period, y'all. We call it Reconstruction, but for me, it's this really interesting time period where I say Black folks are almost left alone. Not completely, because there really isn't. But it's this really fascinating decade post emancipation, but before Jim Crow is like actively launched. And yes, there's still violence against Black people and all these things, but there's also this belief, this philosophy that Black folks are just going to go extinct without the care, benevolence, covering of enslavement of white masters. Black folks will not know what to do. They won't know how to take care of themselves. They're just these unruly, whatever, and, right? So there's this lack of belief in our humanity and our possibility and our potential. And what happens during that time is 2,000 Black men are voted into political office. And a lot of people don't know that. 2,000 Black men. Black communities grow immensely without the threat of death. Life expectancy for Black people goes up. Reading skills and literacy goes up. Like, so much happens during this 10 period time, and it feels like Jim Crow era is this reaction to Black thriving and to Black people living their full lives. So anyways, chapter 3, let me show you the epigraph. I love an epigraph because, again, it speaks to them being in conversation with other scholars. So she quotes W.E.B. Du Bois. I think that's from Souls of Black Folk. It might be from Black Reconstruction, but I think it's from Souls of Black Folk. But he says, the slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, like myself today, and then moved back again toward slavery. And then she also quotes Octavia Butler. She says, all struggles are essentially power struggles. Yes, they are. All struggles are essentially power struggles. Who will rule? Who will lead? Who will define, refine, confine, design? Who will dominate? And we talked a little bit about domination in my previous video. I want to keep going, but I want to skip to a part that I really wanted to share with y'all. I think it's here. She says, while researching for this book, I visited historic Stagville, a former plantation in present-day Durham, North Carolina, now serving as a museum preserving and honoring the legacy of the Black people who lived and worked there for centuries. I rarely visit preserved plantations, as they tend to present beautiful estates without examining the truth of what ugliness made it all possible. After driving down a winding dirt road, my research assistant, Hannah, and I approached a clearing in the trees with a small building, maybe a welcome center or gift shop. As I entered to check in for the tour, a bookcase greeted me with titles like Wake, The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts, and A Mind to Stay, White Plantation, Black Homeland. To the right of the bookcase was more shelving with a bright yellow sign. I leaned in closer and read, Created with Love by local Black-owned small businesses. A tall and thin white man with curly blonde hair greeted me from behind the register, letting me know he would be my tour guide and that we'd get started in about 10 minutes. Hannah and I waited in the car, unsure of what to expect. I tried my best to ignore the ground's beauty. It's difficult for me to acknowledge the sheer natural radiance of sites of violence like former plantations, but Stagville was undeniably breathtaking. Trees surrounded us, and the lush greenery felt all-encompassing. Oddly enough, once the tour started, the trees were one of the first things pointed out as distinctly different from antebellum times. These trees wouldn't have been here. This was all clear cut, and you would have been able to see all the way down to the flat river. I hadn't realized we were standing atop a hill until he said this. Our guide made it clear that removing the trees that separated the fields and slave cabins from the overseer's housing had been a power move. If you're down in those fields, anytime you look up, you see what's important. You look at this White House. Mm, mm. There's a few things here. There's a few things here for me. One, Brea's own reflection and struggle to acknowledge the natural beauty of a plantation because of what it represented as a site of suffering for her people, for our people. So there's that struggle, contradiction to sit on land, and it's just the natural environment. It's the trees, it's the field, it's just the sheer beauty of it, but struggle to acknowledge that because it's a crime scene. It's a crime scene, right? But then knowing that the history The natural environment was constructed to reinforce the power dynamic between the enslaved and the slave master. He says that the trees would not have been there because from the slave quarters, you needed to be able to see the White House. You needed to be able to see the master's house and be reminded of that power that they held over you. So they removed the natural environment. They removed the trees so that they could reinforce their inherent power. And it's interesting because what that does for the mind, for the psyche, just the visual of it, having this white estate, this White House on the hill, and the slave quarters on the bottom of the hill, is it uses the natural environment to reinforce an unnatural dynamic. So it's not natural to enslave people. I don't, contrary to the beliefs of the time and even some beliefs today, it's not natural to enslave people. It's not natural to have an unequal power dynamic over people, but using the natural environment reinforces the assumed naturalness. They want you to believe it's natural. They want you to believe that you not having power, that you being enslaved, that you being trapped on this plantation, that you being a laborer on this plantation is a natural dynamic that you should accept, and your children that will be born after you will have to accept and live through as well. As opposed to the children born on that hill in that house will rule over your children. And that stuck with me so heavy. It actually kind of blows my mind because I almost perhaps thought of the natural environment as an incidental element of enslavement, right? It just so happens that we have these plantations and these fields and these trees and this water, and we just use it as a crime of passion or opportunity. But no, there was so much intention in how the land was cultivated and manipulated and exploited to exploit the people as well. Removing trees. You remove trees, you remove the natural environment. That it just really it sits really heavy with me. It sits really heavy with me. And it really goes again into the depths of the grief that can exist for us when we look at a tree, or when we look at water, or when we look at pastures and fields. I remember I was driving in Alabama for the first time. I think it was last year. And my husband and I are driving, and suddenly we see just miles and miles of cotton fields, miles and miles of cotton fields. And I, I felt what Brea Baker felt in that moment. There was a part of me that was like, wow, like that, it's quite stunning. Like I felt stunned, right? It was stunning. But then there was a part of me that was immediately overwhelmed. I thought about who currently maintains that land. I thought about who used to maintain that land, who was enslaved on the land. There were just so many layers that came up for me. And I did not expect to have such a visceral response and reaction to just seeing cotton fields. Um, but it was there. It was very, very real. And it's weird to now sit on my own land and to work my own land and to maintain my own land, and how having this land has healed my relationship to nature. Because one, being by water is very healing to me, very peaceful, very restful, but also because in working the land, in tending to the grass or planting fruits and vegetables and different things like that, in cutting back and trimming back trees and bushes and all the things, even in just taking care of the horses on the land, I've come into contact with a different type of labor, one that is very refreshing for my soul. But again, I joked with my husband. I was like, I don't think this is my ancestors' wildest dream that I be laboring on this land. And he was like, I think for some of them it is their wildest dream. They wanted to own and be stewards of the land without the exploitation, right? Like the working the land wasn't the problem. The enslavement, the exploitation, the violence, all of that was the problem. The lack of choice, the lack of consent, all of that was the issue. And so reworking our relationship to nature and to land is a part of the fulfillment of some of our ancestors' dream. I'm sure not all of them dreamt of that. I think of Eartha Kitt. I don't dream of labor, right? So I'm sure not all of them dreamt of that. But for the ones that did, for the ones that were forced into an unnatural power dynamic in an unnatural social context of enslavement, Some of them maybe dreamt of just sitting on their land and reading a book and talking to folks about it and experiencing the peace of that. And it breaks my heart that they didn't get that. You know, the promise of 40 acres and a mule was just that. It was a beguiling promise to get black people to do things for them, to use their bodies, to sacrifice their bodies for a war that would not actually benefit them. Um, yeah, yeah. Another thing about reading is it's actually really important that you take your time and let yourself sit with it, especially if it's a nonfiction, especially if heavy topics are being dealt with. Um, so I'm not going to rush through it. I'm not going to pretend like I want to move on. I think this is the end of the video. Um, but some questions that I'm sitting with right now are: how has the natural environment been used to reinforce unnatural social dynamics or power dynamics? How has the natural environment been manipulated against us, against our humanity, against our freedom, and how can we reclaim it? What does it mean to reclaim land, to heal those parts of ourselves that were just attempted to be destroyed? Um, yeah. So I'm going to sit here and reflect some more. Um, Again, I highly encourage you to get the book. Um, it's really good. I feel a little emotional. I feel a little emotional. But it's a really good book, and I'm just so thankful for Brea Baker's work. Again, you should also check out Imani Perry's book. Um, yeah, I hope y'all have a good rest of your day. I'm going to sit here for a little bit, and um, yeah, and then continue with the rest of my day. I was trying to do this before noon, before it was super hot. I'm reading every day, so again, I just want to capture that and share it with y'all, and hopefully we can have some good conversation.